Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today is in continuation of last weekend's video, which was macromolecules of life. And instead of talking about carbohydrates, we will be talking all about proteins today. Just a reminder, as a breakdown of the word macromolecule, macro means large, so we can imply that macromolecules are large molecules that make up living things. So again, here's the breakdown of the four macromolecules: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Today we will be doing proteins. Next week's video will be about lipids. So let's go over proteins and what they are, then we'll do the structure of proteins, and finally their function. So proteins are mainly structural molecules. The foods that you can find a lot of protein in are eggs, seeds, dairy, meat, and many other foods. But typically, a lot of athletes tend to eat these foods because protein gives them good structure for their muscles. And along with being structural molecules, proteins are also catalytic molecules. So they are catalysts, and enzymes, which catalyze and make chemical reactions happen faster, are actually a form of proteins, and we will go over this in the next slide. So now let's talk about the function of proteins. So proteins, as I mentioned before, are structural molecules, and in this case, proteins actually create the physical structure of many living beings. So for example, in humans, they create our hair. Our hair is made of protein, and they also create our nails. On animals, you might see horns, and those horns are made of protein, along with the spider webs that spider makes. So if you ever heard of the case of hair loss or really dry hair, your doctor might recommend taking in more protein so that it can provide a better structure for your hair, and so that your hair can get stronger. And on the right, you can see a picture of really shiny and what looks like really strong hair. That might be because the person eats a lot of protein to keep their hair healthy. Next, let's talk about catalytic molecules. So proteins actually form enzymes, and enzymes promote chemical reactions by lowering the activation energy. And activation energy is the energy that's basically required for this reaction to take place. And all of this helps regulate reactions in living cells. So if you eat a lot of protein, you'll be able to create more enzymes. And by creating enzymes, you're actually promoting healthy and good chemical reactions in your body by lowering the activation energy. So protein is good for you. On the right, you can see on the second picture an example, I guess, of a chemical reaction. I'm not going to explain this picture right now. The only important thing you should look at is that enzymes are a type of protein that acts as a catalyst, speeding up chemical reactions. Okay, so let's move on to structure. So proteins are made up of chains of amino acids joined together by peptide bonds, and peptide bonds are a type of covalent bond. And in proteins, there's a thing called a monomer, and a monomer is just a little building block that makes up the protein. So on the right, you can see an image of two amino acids. And right now, in the first instance, they aren't binded together yet. But in the second instance, this is a peptide bond. So notice how we change from not having any bonds between these two acids to having a bond. And this is called a peptide bond. So the sequence of amino acids in a protein dictates its function. So the way that amino acids are arranged in a protein determines what its function is going to be. So if you have a chain of two amino acids, it's going to be a peptide. But if you have long chains of amino acids, it's going to be a polypeptide. Poly just means multiple or more. Next slide, proteins structure continued. So proteins can exhibit up to 4 levels of structure. There are primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. The first one is just a sequence of amino acids linked together. So this is just an amino acid sequence linked together by a peptide bond. You can see it's just in a straight line. And remember The way that these amino acids are sequenced dictates their structure. The secondary structure is a helix or pleated sheet. So notice how this is a 3D shape now. We have moved on from just being a straight line, but this secondary structure is now a helix, and it will have a different structure than the primary structure. The third structure is a tertiary structure, and this is a complex folding of the protein chain. So as you can see, it kind of gets a little bit jumbled up as compared to the helix structure. This is a folded individual peptide, and it's obviously going to have a different structure than the first two. But there's one more structure to talk about, the quaternary structure, multiple protein chains linked together. So in this, you can see the different colored protein chains, the blue and the beige kind of color one. These are two or more peptides that are linked together and put in this quaternary structure. So remember that they can exhibit up to 4 levels of structure. It doesn't necessarily mean that all proteins are going to reach the quaternary structure. But these are the different structures that you might see when dealing with proteins. And finally, let's talk about denatured protein. So since a protein function is linked to its 3D structure, if they become denatured, they lose their function. And denaturing can happen from a variety of causes, such as really high temperatures that cause the protein to denature, or unsuitable conditions, anything that causes the protein to lose its shape. So you see this folded protein here, and remember that folded protein is part of the tertiary structure. So this folded protein goes through the process of denaturation, and it becomes this denatured protein, meaning that it has no 3D structure and it loses its function. So with this slide, it concludes our lecture on proteins, and I'll quickly go over what we did today. So we started off by really quickly redefining what macromolecules are. We went through the 4 macromolecules. Then we talked about proteins, what they are, and the stuff on this slide is basically the stuff on this slide: structural molecules, catalytic molecules, the basic functions of proteins, basically. And then we started talking about structure, which is a little bit complex, but anyways, we talked about how proteins are bonded together and what they're made of. We talked about sequences, and then we talked about the 4 levels of structure, and finally we talked about denatured protein. So if you have any questions about this topic at all, we encourage you to email us at excelledlearning@gmail.com. If you want to request a future video topic, email us with your suggestion, and we will be sure to do it. In addition to this, please share the video with anyone who you think might benefit, anybody who might be taking biology right now, especially during finals time. And if you have any questions, or if you want us to help with your finals prep, we'd be willing to do that for absolutely free. Just email us with your request. Please like this video and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can see when we post every Sunday. Thank you. Bye.